Welcome back. In this section, we're going to do a little bit endocrinology. We're going to talk about the hormones of the male reproductive system and what they do, as well as negative feedback in that. So if you recall, when we were learning the endocrine system, when we learned about flat pig, there were 4 hormones in there that had to do with the reproductive system. So we are going to use some of them today for the male and some of them tomorrow or next time for the female. So remember, everything from the adenohypophysis was released courtesy of a releasing hormone from the hypothalamus. So we're starting in the hypothalamus with gonadotropin releasing hormones. Okay? And gonadotropin releasing hormone will act on the adenohypophysis, and the adenohypophysis is going to stimulate interstitial cells stimulating hormone. Gonna trigger the release of that hormone. Now that hormone is actually the same hormone as luteinizing hormone is in the female, so it has 2 names, and some people go with interstitial cell stimulating hormone in the male, and other people just call it luteinizing hormone. I go with interstitial cell stimulating hormone because you know what interstitial cells are, and now you know where they're going to work, and it makes a lot more sense because luteinizing doesn't have anything to do with the male, it only has to do with the female. So what's interstitial cell stimulating hormone going to do? Well, it's going to act on the interstitial cells of the testes, as you might expect. So we have all these tropic hormones on here. And what it does to the interstitial cells of the testes is it stimulates them to produce androgens, your testosterone, okay? So that the I of flat pig, interstitial cell stimulating hormone, which was released under the stimulus of gonadotropin releasing hormone, will then cause the testes to produce another hormone, testosterone. So it's a 3-hormone chain. Now, in addition to this, you will have negative feedback once testosterone levels are normal onto both the adenohypophysis and the hypothalamus for these hormones. And hopefully this all makes sense now. But those are not the only hormones involved, because if you notice, all we were doing is making testosterone, and yet we weren't making any sperm, but that has something to do with hormones as well. So in addition to this, which we already had, under the influence of gonadotropin releasing hormone, the adenohypophysis also releases follicle stimulating hormone, another hormone which is named for its function in the woman, but it doesn't have an alternative name. So follicle stimulating hormone in the male works on sustentacular cells of the testis. And we'll talk more about these cells later on. And these cells then will secrete an androgen binding protein that the androgens can bind to, duh. And once the androgens bind to the androgen binding protein produced by the sustentacular cells of the testes, that is what triggers sperm production. Okay. So we actually have to have both of these hormones being produced by the adenohypophysis and working together in order to get sperm. If they don't work together and you don't get your follicle stimulating hormone, then all you're doing is making androgens. In addition, the sustentacular cells will also produce something called inhibin, which gives negative feedback against the follicle stimulating hormone. So if we go back to the seminiferous tubule, this is where the magic happens, because this is where the sustentacular cells are located, and then outside the interstitial cells are being stimulated to make the hormones. So I want you to realize 2 different locations, 2 different hormones, and so they are independent of each other in location. And with that, we are done with the hormones of the male reproductive system, and I will come back later and we will go through the pathways of spermatogenesis and spermiogenesis.